Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z, and tonight we are taking a road trip in season 9. What were the locations, real and fictional, that the boys visited? Why did they pick those? Why did the writers pick those? And what was so special about them? But before we dive into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Samantha.
Hello there, I'm Samantha. I'm the newbie in the Supernatural track because I still haven't quite finished watching it. I'm in the end of season 11 now, so I'm getting there, just a little bit ahead of where we are in our conversation. Besides watching Supernatural, I'm known for writing the menopausal superhero series and short form horror.
Okay, Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been with Supernatural since that very, very first episode.
And Anna.
I'm Anna Kensing. I am a writer, and I too have been with Supernatural from the very beginning. I took a brief break when I wasn't watching it as it was airing, but then I caught back up to it, and yeah, been there ever since.
Okay. And I'm Gail Z. and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all of the modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. So season 9, what were the locations that jumped out to you and made you go, "Whoa, that's interesting"? Elektra.
Well, there was that one big city episode in Chicago where they were trying desperately to get a spin-off going.
We don't talk about bloodlines.
Well, and we are not going to talk about the fact that next week there actually will be a successful spin-off. But abject failure of bloodlines, but we did actually get to see Chicago, so there's that. But
yeah,
we so rarely get to see the big city, and they thought doing something monster focused in the big city was going to work with Supernatural. Who knows?
Yeah, it just kind of went against the whole two guys in the heartland going through the back roads and the small towns. Because there's so much, even then there was so much urban fantasy set in big cities. But go figure, it didn't hit. Anna, how about you?
Well, the bunker obviously is a major location in season 9. There's so many episodes that take place in the bunker, or start in the bunker, or end in the bunker. So, I think it's almost its own character here in this season. And we get to see even more of the bunker than we did in season 8. So we find out that the bunker has a garage, and it's got this gigantic computer room, which apparently before was the room that hosts this gigantic 1950s computer was a laboratory in the 1930s, which we discover in the episode when Dorothy shows up, Dorothy from Oz, whose father, L. Frank Baum, turned out to be a man of letters. So we just get to really see so much more of the bunker and find out a little bit more about it. And we'll still see more new things about the bunker in seasons to come. But I really think that season 9 is sort of the first season when the bunker is almost, its own character in terms of the location.
Well, and Charlie is magic and can take a big ass computer that works with tubes and connect it to her tablet.
Right.
Because
she's have an incredible collection of adapters.
She's Charlie, so she can do all kinds of things.
She can do anything.
Yeah, she can do anything. Yeah, I love that we got Oz. That was a real standout. I love anything to do with the bunker. We also got several visits to Sioux Falls again. And so it's always nice to go back there and see Jody and kind of be back on home territory. So those are definitely some of the favorites. Now, diving in, the boys went a lot of places, some of them well-known, some of them kind of strange. I've got to laugh because Lafayette, Indiana, this is the second time Lafayette shows up in Supernatural. Our son went to Purdue. I spent 4 years going to Lafayette and West Lafayette. Great hamburgers and, a few things. I didn't see any ghosts, but I did have to laugh when I looked up what places in Lafayette are supposed to be haunted. They actually did have several cemeteries, and one of which is supposed to have a violent ghost. This was in episode 3 of season 9, and the Fowler House, which is a number of haunted homes, but one that has been turned into kind of an event center, gorgeous Victorian, huge Victorian. And there are a number of houses like that in Lafayette. But I just had to laugh because 4 years and I never got to see any ghosts. But I will tell you that on Saturday nights in Lafayette, they have a wolf sanctuary. And if you want to go out and howl with the wolves on a Saturday night, you can do that, and who knows, there might be shifters out there. What else jumped out to you when you're looking at season 9's locations?
So I enjoyed several of the houses in this one. I like seeing Jody's house, but we also got to see Kane's house.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the name of the family, but the family that Garth marries into, that farmhouse. I can't remember the family's name, but that family house. And then for a totally different kind of house, you've got the second, I'm looking up what his name is, the Cuthbert Sinclair's house. When they yeah. And I just, all their house sets are always so fully realized and thought out, what kind of clutter is there, what kind of stuff is there. And even like, I felt like Kane's house and the farmhouse where Garth was with the family were kind of, I know that they don't really film everything in Kansas, but I used to live in Kansas, and they do such a good job capturing that kind of prairie house where you could be in the living room and you can't tell if it's 1850, 1950, or 2020.
Mm-hmm.
They just have this weird timelessness, and they really capture that in those houses.
Well, they also, a lot of the houses, and I can't tell whether they're a set or whether they do film some scenes in a location. I think it's a mix. But throughout the series, there's a lot of, I would call it craftsman mission style, Frank Lloyd Wright-ish kind of things with the stained glass at the landing on the main stairs.
Stained glass in Kane's house with the bees.
Yeah, that sort of detail shows up in a lot of the homes. So I don't know whether that's what they had a lot of in Vancouver and its environments, or whether those were sets. But I loved those with the big staircase and the mission style. I don't know what you call that. I think of it as Frank Lloyd Wright, but yeah, the houses had incredible detail. Elektra, how about you?
Well, if you're talking about houses, Sonny's home for
Mhm.
boys was another nice, big, welcoming is the only word I can think of for that house.
Mm-hmm.
It just had a hominess about it. Whoever dressed those sets really gave it that homey feel to it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was Hurleyville, New York, just really.
Mm-hmm.
And Hurleyville is a real town in
Mhm.
upstate New
Yeah,
York. It's sort of west of Poughkeepsie, which we also hear about in this season as well. Poughkeepsie being the code name, the code word that Sam and Dean have to tell each other to bug out of whatever location they're in or whatever dangerous situation they're in. But yeah, Hurleyville's a real town in upstate
Mhm.
New York.
And Poughkeepsie is
And
near and dear to some
the
of our
small
hearts.
town- Pardon?
Poughkeepsie is near and dear to some of our hearts.
Yeah.
I used to go there every year.
I can even spell it. Yeah, Hurleyville has the Burn Bray Mansion, which comes up on most haunted attractions near Hurleyville. And it's, of course, big mansion, tragic story. Nothing really unusual in its haunting, but it's there. Yeah, and I agree with you, Elektra, on so many of the houses. The people dressing those sets didn't grow up in Hollywood mansions. They had to have had personal experience with normal middle America houses because they get the little details so right. It's kind of like watching Stranger Things and you're going, oh yeah, we had one of those.
Like my mom had those curtains.
Yeah, and that couch. Yeah.
That couch.
But they get the details right beyond what I think you would get out of, looking it up in a book, because
there's one person that works there that gets those details right, and there's somebody else that's inspired to do goofy hotel rooms. And it's quite possibly not the same person. Everybody has their little niche.
Yeah. And Jerry Wanick, who was in charge of all of that, put out a gorgeous coffee table book with a lot of the sets that were used throughout the series, including all those goofy hotel rooms.
I need to find that.
DM me and I'll send you the information, because it is truly beautiful. But yeah, so where else did we have any memorable hotel rooms in any of these cities? Because I love how they're usually themed to, you've got cowboys, you've got fish, you've got bowling. Anna?
Yeah, so in the episode 15, Thin Man, so they're in Springdale, Washington, which I didn't look up to see whether or not Springdale itself is a real town, but they're at Paul's Old Mill Inn, which is inspired by Paul Bunyan. So there's an amazing giant woodcut of Paul Bunyan and his big blue ox babe. And there's also this huge mountain mural, a mural of like a mountain scene above the beds. And then there's a scene of Sam sitting at the desk, and on the desk is a lamp and there's a silhouette on the lampshade of a moose. So they just really went to town on this particular hotel, which is, I think, one of my favorite hotels.
Another really cool place was in The Purge, that spa.
Oh yeah.
The details in that spa. Also, we got to meet Donna in the spa. But the details there, from the creepy basement where they had things that they oughtn't, to the industrial food where we had Dean as a lunch lady.
And those floor to ceiling windows in the like yoga studio. And
Yeah.
Right, to where they had lovely outdoor places where they were doing stretches and all the nice things you do at one of those really, really nice getaway places.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that seems like actually kind of a great spa. I wouldn't mind going to that spa and having a little yoga,
well, also,
and having a little fat sucked out of me.
And no matter what you did,
whatever, fine.
well, as long as you got her and not her brother, you'd make it through.
Right? No matter what you did, you lost the weight.
Right?
Painlessly.
But I always felt about that Doctor Who episode where the fat just walks away. It was like, yeah, okay, we could limit that. I think that could really sell. Yeah, I looked up Springdale, Washington, and I didn't find any native hauntings to it. But going back to Randolph, New York, in that first episode, they had legends of a headless horseman and a woman in white and green orbs and the whole shebang. So,
So my question is, how did they get from how do they end up in Randolph, New York after the end of season 8, right? Because we don't get any information about that. So one of the locations that I was going to bring up in this season is that at the beginning of the first episode, when Sam is in the coma and he's in the Impala, right? And so we're in Sam's brain, and Sam is in a coma, and he's trying to decide whether to come back into life or move on to the afterlife. And of course he's having this conversation in the Impala because that's their home, right? But then it turns out that they're in Randolph, New York, which is a town in far western New York. There is no Linwood Memorial Hospital there, but there is a Memorial Hospital in Linwood, New Jersey. So, you know, whatever, mashup here. But I don't think that we understand. I couldn't figure out how we got to Randolph, New York from the end of season 8, because I think they were in like, you know, Texas or Kansas, or they were not anywhere close to the East Coast. So, and Sam's like super sick at the end of season 8.
It's like we might have found seems like we might have found a closer hospital.
Right?
Well, I figured out why in season, you know, end of season 3, beginning of season 4, why does Sam drive from New Haven, Connecticut, where Dean dies, to Pontiac, Illinois?
Yeah.
With Dean in the back of the Impala. Why? Why? There are woods in Connecticut. The last time I checked, you could bury somebody there, I'm sure, as easily as in Pontiac, Illinois.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a little bit of a discontinuity that I found confusing.
Yeah.
You don't want to look too closely sometimes at how many miles they manage to cover in a day and that kind of thing, because unless they can teleport, it's just not possible.
Yeah, they have to hustle a whole lot of pool for that gas money.
Although
Oh, yeah.
speaking of number of miles that they cover and sort of what's reasonable and what's not, in episode 5, the Dog Dean afternoon episode, so they're in the bunker, and you know, they're talking about how there's a case, and Sam says that this case is just a couple hours away in Oklahoma, and Enid, Oklahoma is also a real place. It's north of Oklahoma City. It's closer to the Kansas border than it is to Oklahoma City, and it's just under 5 hours from Lebanon. But because these are Midwestern boys, like 5 hours, a couple hours, like that's the same thing, right? Like that really is a day trip to them. So yeah, but
and somehow they never get caught behind the hay truck. I always got caught behind the hay truck trying to go to school.
Yeah. Well, if you've ever been in the Midwest or been around Midwesterners, the whole idea of let's go out to dinner. I hear there's a good restaurant and it's like 3 hours away. But hey, you know, let's make a night of it. When you live in vast distances, your perception changes on an hour and a half to go to the movies, you know. Yeah.
As far as Enid goes, but how far is that from Jenny Lawson, the comic writer? She's really into taxidermy, and every time I see that episode where there's that the rat Game of Thrones that it opens on, I can only think of Jenny Lawson, the bloggess.
Mm-hmm.
right.
She's so into those taxidermied animals, and she dresses them up, and that is just her.
Interesting.
They should have sent her that Game of Thrones thing. She would have taken proper care of it. When they
Well,
she's from Texas, I think.
She is from Texas. So yeah, so that wouldn't
have been so far away. I mean, you know, long distances and all that.
Yeah. Dallas is about 4 hours from Tulsa. I know because my in-laws live in Tulsa, and a really good friend lives in Dallas, and we've actually driven back and forth in between. So yeah, I mean, the thing, Texas and Oklahoma are also really, really big states.
So. I've been there. Yeah.
So depending on where you are in either state, it could take 4 hours or it could take 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Houston to El Paso is about 12 hours.
Yeah.
Do not ask why I know that.
Well, and in Enid, one of the most haunted buildings is the Knox building, and it's got a ghostly elevator man, which I just think is extra creepy. I don't know whether he's the elevator operator or he just shows up in elevators, but that's just creepy.
Interesting.
Because I'm always interested with the episodes. How did they pick some of these locations? Did they throw a dart at the map? Did somebody have a person?
Have a dartboard. I mean, I'm holding out for the dartboard.
You know, sometimes it definitely feels like somebody knew a legend about that place and they decided to build off of that. But
Mhm.
other times I feel like there's a bunch of inside jokes that if I were in the writer's room, I would know that we're here because somebody's got a girlfriend named Enid, or, we're over here because somebody's Aunt Betty is from there, or whatever.
Well,
group.
or I'm wearing a t-shirt from Cleveland today, so obviously that was why episode 21 was set in Cleveland.
Mhm.
I'm not kidding. I really am wearing a Cleveland t-shirt.
Oh, okay.
Had an unexpected layover there once, needed a clean t-shirt.
Yeah, mine's trilobites. I don't think that'll help for a location.
And that's the same episode where they started it in Scotland in the 1700s.
Mhm.
Right.
One of the only times
And right now and again, they end up in the UK for some reason.
Usually
Well, they
Crowley
were-
related.
Crowley.
Yeah, well,
Crowley's fine.
I like Crowley. He has good taste in liquor.
Yes.
Mhm.
He's
And-
a single malt man.
Yes. And
I was
he
also-
stays in a hotel.
Oh, go ahead.
So he stays in a hotel, and his hotel room, and I'm sort of scrolling back through my notes trying to recall which episode this was, but Crowley stays in a hotel, and it is, this is in Blade Runners. And so it is very different from the hotel rooms that Sam and Dean stay in, right? It's much bigger, it's much more luxurious. There's a, bigger, there's like a bar cart, not just a sort of, like trashy mini bar. There's not just a mini fridge. It's like a whole suite, because he's Crowley and he likes the finer points in life. And so there's a whole closet where he can store, somebody that he's torturing.
He's used to having staff and just saying,
Yes,
"Ooh, fetch me what I want."
exactly.
I liked seeing Somerset, PA show up as, a native Pennsylvanian. Somerset, if you go on the turnpike, you've passed by Somerset, if not through it. And there's actually a sunken city in Somerset. It's one of those places where they built a dam for like flood control or US Army Corps of Engineers or whatever, and they bought out everybody and then built the dam and then flooded it. But with the drought conditions, it's also one of those places where when the water gets low enough, you can see the building foundations and some of the walls. And of course, there's usually a cemetery that they didn't bother relocating people from that's underneath that dam. So I never knew that about Somerset until I went looking for haunted places in Somerset. And I would have loved to have seen some of that in the episode with Somerset. Of course we didn't, but it's cool knowing it's there, and the Winchesters could always go back and deal with that. That was in Road Trip.
Yeah, we had a lot of bodies come up because of the drought conditions.
Lake Mead is finding all kinds of people. I'm holding out for, Jimmy Hoffa or Bugsy Siegel.
Yeah, that would be great if we could finally find Jimmy Hoffa.
What were some other ones that caught your attention?
Well, one thing I always enjoy in the show is those kinds of settings that feel like they could really be anywhere. So, you could almost imagine that this is happening in your town, and just those little mundane settings, stuff like the little convenient mart that Cass ends up working at for a while.
Gas and Sip.
Steve,
Yes.
please.
Oh yes, he was Steve then. Yes. And of course, all of our diners and truck stops and all of those kinds of places, because they do have a sameness, pretty much no matter where they are. And I think that contributes in the show to feeling like this could happen where you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to an extent, with the boys being constantly on the road and the Impala really being their home, the only neighborhood they ever got were those truck stops and gas stations and convenience stores and Biggersons that were the same from place to place. That's the only consistency they got that most of us get from a hometown or from living in a place for a while. And so while normal travelers figure they'll eat at a chain restaurant because while it won't be great, it probably won't totally suck. I would think that that would be have much more of that hometown feel to them because they don't really have a hometown. Not one that they've lived in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Elektra, what else?
Well, we did go to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
and we got to see Heaven's jail, which was new piece of heaven.
Yeah.
And is this the first season that we get to see the sandbox?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Because I've got notes
Yeah.
about, the Heaven's Door is a sandbox. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would have made those notes if we'd been seeing it before.
Yeah. I don't think we have seen it before.
Yeah, I think,
So,
yeah,
so
I think
that's
it
a
is.
big thing, is that silly playground where we have the sandbox,
Hmm.
which was a genius idea, and yet it is so silly.
It is a sandbox with cool runes in it, but from what isn't going to cost us an arm and a leg to repeat whenever we need it. It was a great idea.
It's reminiscent somewhat of Thor's, and using the gateway he uses to get from Asgard to Midgard, and the runes appear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With way fewer special effects.
Yeah, finding out that heaven has a jail is kind of like when you find out that there actually is Disney jail at Disney World. And if you get in too much trouble, you'll go to Mickey jail, and it's not the happiest place on earth.
Yeah, well, they're
It's just
having
for
enough
a jail,
trouble.
though.
anyway.
You compare it to some of the other jails that we've been in across Supernatural, and Heaven's Jail is still kind of posh.
It's not as bad as Hell's, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not like slimy and wet or anything. It's just kind of plain.
No,
Yeah.
Disney jail is slimy and wet. No, sorry, that's
I've
just
never been.
well, that's just this week.
Yes.
This week.
Oh,
for sure.
true.
Orlando's underwater this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of sunken cities, yeah.
So that abandoned industrial site in or near Eugene, Oregon, in
Mhm.
episode 2, where they go to. So the Supernatural Wiki doesn't say anything about this, but to me, that looked a lot like the Enverse location.
Could be.
And which I know that they filmed the Enverse location they filmed that on the set of the movie Watchmen, because they were sort of filming at the same time, and like also filming in Vancouver. And I know that I've been on a location tour at a Supernatural convention in Vancouver, and I know that they reuse places.
Mhm.
And so I don't know whether that particular set is still sort of set up in some place so that it can be reused, but like some of the buildings look very, very similar. Some of the sort of like decoration around the windows of the building looks similar. So that was a little interesting thing. And then also in that episode, apparently the exterior of the house where Abaddon is restored, her, like Josie Sands' corpse is like dragged across the floor and, tossed into a, filthy bathtub, and blood is, poured over her and whatever. So the exterior of that house, that it was previously used in season 5 and season 8. So, they do reuse locations and they do reuse sets. So yeah, so I don't know, but that
They reuse
abandoned
guest
industrial
stars
place
even.
really does look a lot like that. The
Mhm.
Embers.
They reuse people now and again. They just dress them differently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Or if a couple of years go by, they were a kid and now they're a grown up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was very surprised. If anybody's watching Big Sky, the one receptionist who keeps flirting with the new sheriff in town played Adam Milligan's mom, and that's just disturbing. Yeah, it's just disturbing. Well, I always wonder, so many times in the show when they have a confrontation with one of the angels, the demons, some of the gods, it happens in this big empty, abandoned industrial site. And I always wonder, do they actually go to a place like that? If they did, could they possibly light it? What would be the hazards with asbestos and you know, different environmental toxins? Or do they just recreate that empty warehouse look in a soundstage somewhere? Because there are an awful lot of them, but you know, every city has its fair share of empty big places too. So I don't know enough about the film industry to know whether or not they actually go to any of those, but I'm always curious.
Well, building empty big space out of either an abandoned space, as long as it's reasonably cleaned up from toxins, or an empty soundstage is pretty easy. Dressing it to be big empty space.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you look
not
at them,
hard.
and go, you've thrown a bunch of, okay, did you get everybody's lunch wrappers and tip over a garbage can and just get random crap to throw around? Because you don't have to fill the whole place. You just have to make it look like maybe vagrants were here or stuff blew in.
Oh, and
Yeah.
it's like setting up for your Zoom call, right? The rest of my office doesn't have to look nice at all. I just have to have my one cozy spot so that I look like I don't live in squalor.
That's why I have a background. Yeah.
That's why I have a background.
In the rest of my office. What are we not, well, you know, one of the very haunted places they went to in Blade Runners was Kansas City, Missouri. I looked that up and there were a ton of haunted homes, haunted hotels. There was a theater there was one house that was called the Sawn Castle. Those big Victorian, you know, turrets and everything. And what intrigued me about the ghost there, and nobody seemed to have a theory about who the ghost was that there was a guy in the house who kept getting attacked at night by this thing that would leave him covered with scratches, but it didn't attack his wife and child in the same house. And I'm thinking, oh, you need the Winchesters for that. You need some salt for that. That's, you know.
The World War I museum is there, right?
I don't know. It didn't come up on the list of haunted places, but it might be. I would think everything there would be.
I went there when we were in Kansas City. Kansas City was 2016.
Yeah.
So I went down to the museum that first day.
Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri? That's always confusing.
Weren't we in Missouri?
I don't know. I didn't go.
I get confused. I got concussed that first night, so my memories are a little hazy. That was the really bad concussion.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. I had, and nobody's, yeah. So
now, Ogden, Utah, which shows up in, which one was it? It had enough haunted places in Little Old Ogden, which was in Metafiction, that I bookmarked its haunted places website because there were just too darn many to write down.
oh my.
Yeah, which makes you wonder, you know, there were cemeteries, there were homes. And now my site isn't loading. Of course it's not. But compared to some of the towns where when I looked it up, I couldn't really find anything. It was interesting to find Little Ogden with a whole bunch of paranormal stuff going on.
Well, it's in Utah. I mean, they don't have a whole lot else to do.
In the ghost board. This is possible. What have we left out, folks? What have we?
Did we talk about Milton? Milton,
No.
Illinois?
No.
From Mother's Little Helper, where we got to see young Josie / Abaddon and young Henry Winchester. Going to see the convent that had a little bit of a problem, and Josie had her little bit of a problem too. The unfortunate visit.
Yeah. And there was
all those problems.
there was a home in Milton, Illinois, that is one of its most haunted places. A lot of people died of tuberculosis, never left. I just always wonder when they end up in some of these cities, did anybody from the show look at any of the, hey, is there any local lore we can use? Or again, did they just throw a dart?
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of hard to tell. Sometimes I think that they
We
do,
know they
but then
did
other
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, we know that they did sometimes, but I think other times they just throw a dart because they just need a location and, whatever. Oh, we haven't been to
Montana in a while.
Montana in a while. Let's go there.
Yeah, because they have done real locations and referenced real haunted places like Lilydale, New York, and the Lizzie Borden,
Philadelphia.
the H.H. Holmes prison. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There's
So
a
they-
documentary on Lilydale on Amazon.
Oh, that'll be
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
thought
they
it
do
was-
reference it sometimes.
Yeah, they do sometimes, and then other times I really do think it's like, oh, I haven't been to Oklahoma in a while. Let's go to Enid. So they go to Hartford, South Dakota, in
Mhm.
A Rock and a Hard Place, where they become born-again virgins.
Oh,
And Dean discovers that Susie, who's the leader of the, Christian born-again virgins group, that he recognizes her from Casa Erotica 28. And so the motel that they stay at there, and so Sheriff, somebody else is there, but so the hotel that they stay at is called McCarthy's Scottish Motel, and it's decorated in this like red tartan. It's just sort of amazing. And apparently the name of the motel, McCarthy, is a shout out to Johnny McCarthy, who directed the episode. And so it's just kind of amazing with all of its plaid delightfulness. There's Scottish shields, there's tartan on the wallpaper. The divider is these crests with red stags, and it's just a lot of plaid. It's kind of amazing.
right. That
I'll have
was
to go back and look at that one.
the APU group. And when they
Yes.
asked what it was the abstinence purifies us.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. That's really fantastic.
Everybody has one of those groups. So we just go
Almost as good as Snart in in the when Dean kind of turns into a dog, Dog Dean afternoon.
Mhm.
It was something like, oh gosh, any of you remember what it stood for? I just thought it was hilarious that it was Snart.
Yeah, stop something animal.
Rough treatment. There was the
Yeah.
rough treatment was in,
Rough treatment was the RT. Yeah, and I can't
and
remember
using
the
rough
M
and something about dogs is just kind of funny. But
Wow.
Well, it's like in
That whole
the
episode was just so clever.
oh, I
Heritage
really enjoyed that
Series
one.
You,
Yeah.
which
Well,
was the
and-
Society for the Protection of Elf Welfare or something like that.
Yeah.
Steve Valentine was just remarkably good in that,
Mhm.
with all the different animal combinations. He's a monster. No, he's a chef. No, he's a monster who is a chef. And he's
Mhm.
just trying to cure some terrible disease he has.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the more fascinating monsters because, yes, he was killing people, but it was interesting to see how the different things you are what you eat. And especially when he must have eaten a chameleon or something, and he kind of peels off the wall and you didn't see him. I know you can do that with body makeup, and that was so scary.
Yes, that was really scary.
He just had a really, really good cookbook.
Old-timey recipes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Don't we all wish we had one of those?
So I thought of another setting we didn't touch was Cass HQ. When all the angels are gathering around him and basically Cass for president. It was it's pretty simple, but it really had the look of one of those rooms where a political campaign without much money gathers with all of its true believers and their little flags. And it was perfect for what was going on in the story to go for that vibe for where they gathered.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, yes. And there's
What-
another.
Going
yeah,
back
Cora.
to episode 2 in Devil May Care when they're in Eugene, Oregon, that Eugene has a pioneer cemetery that has a bagpipe ghost. So, you know, might not have gotten the plaid in the hotel room, but they could have had a bagpipe ghost. So I, you know, again, just throwing in things that actually happen to some of the locations and saying,
They
"Is this
really
for
should have
fun?"
done that. That would have been so remarkably annoying and loud.
Not a
I
stealthy
mean, they should
ghost.
have just had him appearing periodically to annoy people.
Mhm.
Just playing the bagpipes at 3 in the morning. He doesn't even have to
Doesn't
do it.
matter. 3 in the
Terrifying.
afternoon, they're still annoying. Bagpipes are incredibly annoying.
And then the motel room or the hotel room that Crowley is in King of the Damned, where he's recruiting his underlings to support his campaign for King of Hell, which is the opposite of what you were just talking about, Samantha, in terms of, you know, the sort of hole in the wall, you know, Main Street, just office, like empty storefront as the location, the campaign office, the sort of like local campaign office. It's the opposite of that, right? It's a
Mhm.
you know, like big conference room with like mahogany wood tables and big padded chairs, and Crowley sort of, you know, like presiding over it and trying to convince his underlings that he still should be King of Hell, and it's got wood paneling and pillars and wall sconces.
No, I hadn't really compared those, but they did both have kind of campaign stories in there, and you've got your grassroots hero and your entrenched you know system person.
Well,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Crowley is campaigning to a bunch of people who are trying to figure out who's going to win before they pick sides.
Right.
Mhm.
Because demons.
I think that's a lot of politics, actually.
There are some people who actually are looking at platforms and trying to figure things out, and demons are mostly looking to see what will it get them.
Right.
And since there might be punishment involved if they don't support the right person, they may be playing both sides.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of it there than there is in real life.
Yeah.
Oh, well, folks, we have blown through our time like we always do. There's always more to say. But thank you so much for being here. Before we go, let's let everybody know where they can find you online, starting with you, Anna.
You can find me at my website, annakensing.com, or on TikTok at annakensing.com.
Okay, Elektra and
You
friend.
can find me at untilmidnight.com, and often you can find Oscar there too.
Very good. Samantha.
You can find me at samanthabryant.com, or if you want pictures of the small dogs and mushrooms, find me on Instagram at Samantha B Writer, just the letter B in the middle.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the social media is a variation of those. So if you spell them right, you'll find me. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, but mostly you can find me here on Continual. So again, thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon on Continual. So we'll see you online.